Thanks so much for coming, everybody. I'm Ben Hunter. I am the hunter in Hunter Dunbar. And we're thrilled to have you all here tonight. And we're thrilled to have these two gentlemen here tonight. And we have been honored over the past several weeks to have the opportunity to show these fabulous artworks by Mr. Michael A. Cummings. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our director, Clarence Johns, who brought Michael's work to us actually in a stroke of brilliance. And then we have brought it to you and to the world in a limited fashion. And here he is. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoy this.
Well, thank you all so much for coming out to celebrate Michael and this incredible exhibition of 6 decades of Michael's practice. I've known Michael for about almost 3 years now, and it was always kind of a dream of mine to put together a really wide-ranging exhibit of Michael's work, having seen a lot of his larger quilt work shown in museums and prominent settings, but also wanting to bring attention to a number of his historic works on paper, many of which haven't ever been seen before, and also just shed a lot more light on his practice. And so we're also just thrilled to have the New Yorker write about Michael and Talk of the Town this week. We're thrilled to have the National Endowment for the Arts honor Michael with the 2023 National Heritage Fellowship, and just really, really happy to have a lot more eyes and a lot more attention on Michael's wonderful body of work in his many, many years of his practice. So tonight we're going to have a conversation with Michael and his longtime friend and architectural scholar, historian, and just friend for many years. So we're going to have a little talk and then open it up to some questions from the audience and have a little reception afterward. So I'll leave it to you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I think, both of us, I think we'd like to thank all of you for finding time on a Thursday night to come join us. I've known Michael for, we won't say how many years, but for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Pretty long time.
Almost 50 years.
Yeah, how many?
50.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to say it. I definitely wasn't going to say it. But anyway, he's been a great friend. We're neighbors in Harlem for many, many years, and we've seen the city evolve. And the part of the night's talk is talking about a little bit about Michael's evolving in the city and also the city evolving with our time together and all of that. So one of the things I found really interesting when we first started to meet and talk is that you're not from New York.
No, I'm from Los Angeles. I was born there. I'm the second generation. My parents were also born there. And both sides of my relatives come from Georgia. And my grandparents, they all arrived in the early 1900s in Los Angeles. And
besides, were there many other Black African American families then, do you think?
I don't. Well, there was a section that everybody had to stay in. It was very segregated. And so all the people that came primarily from the South ended up in one area, and they got to know each other. It wasn't until maybe the mid-'60s and after civil rights that people were able to move around the city, because deeds and real estate brokers and homeowners all designated they didn't want Black people to buy the houses, nor Jews in some areas. So it was all of that going on. So my mother talked about people coming from different parts of the South, all ending up South Central Los Angeles. Yeah.
It was interesting, we were talking about families and making this kind of connections. So I don't know all the generations after the boomer generation, and there's been the X generation, all that. I started realizing we were probably the first sort of market share that got like a tag. And so we were children of the post-war. Our parents had been through the war. Michael's mom, my mom, and another friend's mom were all the same age. And so you could see similarities in their lives and stuff. So talk about a little bit of like, as being a boomer, like that kind of coming of age in Los Angeles. And what were some of the things that sort of attracted you in your education, stuff that sort of drew you toward art and sort of art interests?
Well, I inherited asthma as a child from my family, my father's side of the family. So I was very asthmatic, in and out of the hospital a lot. So I was alone a lot, and I realized that at some point I started drawing just to entertain myself. And I looked at the wallpaper on the walls, and I looked at cartoons, I was drawing that. And eventually I extended myself out to the garden and started drawing flowers and stuff like that. So that's how I got started into that area. It was a field trip that I made with, I think, junior high school to a museum, and they had Van Gogh sunflowers on exhibit. And at that point, I said, oh, I want to do that. That just kind of captivated
That's shooting high. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good model. That's pretty good.
it captivated me because of the thickness of the paint, the bright color, the size, and everything. So I guess at that point I started to maybe use watercolor, kind of moved into oil paint. At that point they didn't have acrylic paint too popular at that point. And my mother put me in the garage to do all of that.
Now there's a bad thing. It's a place of, this is a place of
And I soon realized it was a toxic sort of situation because of the cleaning the brushes, the oil paint, and all that sort of stuff. So but I stuck with it, and everything I did was a masterpiece. And so I did that for a while, and then but my parents wanted me to go into business, and so through high school I took business classes. The first 2 years in college I took business classes. And after I got to accounting 2, and I looked around the room, I said, nah, I don't want to do this. So
we don't have anyone here from our bookkeeping department.
So I sat down with my father and declared I didn't want to take any more business classes. And I wanted to be an artist, which I didn't have a great definition of what that was. But he said, oh, okay. And then he painted a very gloom picture of what an artist was all about. He said, a starving artist. He said, you want to be a starving artist? I said, yes. He said, you want to live in an apartment with no heat and all that? I said, yes.
It all came true.
So he said, okay, do it, but we're not going to support you. So I said, okay. So I got a job. How did I get the job? I got a job at night, and then I went to school in the daytime. That didn't work out too well because it was a swing shift. So I got home about maybe 5 or 6 in the morning, and I tried to sleep, and I would wake up. I didn't know what day it was, what time it was. So I gave that up, and then I got a day job and went to school at night. And I took art classes, but primarily just to explore what art form I wanted to get into, because I was always attracted to color. So it had to be something that had color to it. So I took ceramics, but I couldn't get past the cylinder, the cylinder. And then the teacher said, well, the color, I guess, paints that you use on ceramic, he said the brighter colors were more expensive, and he didn't want to use those. So I said, oh, well. And then I left that, and then I thought I wanted to be interior decorator, so I went to a college that gave a degree on that. But I talked to one graduate student, and he told me, he said, well, Michael, it's hard to get a job like that if you don't come in with clients that have money already to be, a customer. So I didn't have...
You didn't know Diane Carroll?
No, I didn't know that. So I gave that up. And then eventually I moved to New York.
Well, it's interesting too, like, even earlier when you talk about like being in the hospital or being isolated, Basquiat, Jean-Michel Basquiat had like a car accident or something when he was really young. Probably what got him into art was actually the same thing, isolation. And his mother had given him a gray anatomy book, so a lot of you see all like the skeletal drawings and all that. He picked up from that sort of like his fascination about like what was being done to him operation-wise. So it's interesting how that solitude in a way helped you.
It really was solitude, I couldn't go outside and play. And I was allergic to everything.
We always talked about California had Christmas trees. My father was a big believer in, I grew up on the East Coast, and he was a big believer, like a real tree, like you could have a false tree or whatever. Been talking to Michael, that wasn't the case in LA.
No, and LA is associated with Hollywood.
Right.
So Technicolor, trees were not necessarily have to be real. So my father would, and they spray painted Christmas trees out there, different colors. So he would come home with a blue one, a yellow one, a white one, a pink one. Pink and white were very popular, and blue because of the light bulbs and stuff like that. So, but eventually we found out, because the house was filled with this paint smell and I was getting sick, that it was car paint that they sprayed on the tree.
Oh, wow.
And so my mother outlawed that, so we had to have a real green tree.
For your health.
Yeah.
But then you come to New York. Now, tell a little bit like what brought you to New York. Had you been here before you moved?
Never. Well, I had friends that had graduated from UCLA. One wanted to be a songwriter, one wanted to be a filmmaker, and they had been here about 6 months, almost a year. And they invited me to come check it out. And they said, once you get here, you won't like LA anymore. And I didn't believe that, because who wouldn't like Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, the beaches and all that? So when I got here, it took me a little while to understand what they meant, but I did realize that New York had much more than LA. And so it took me about 2 or 3 years to get used to the place, because I didn't know how to dress for the cold weather. And people said I was wearing Puerto Rican colors. And I said, what's that, you know? And so, and I experienced my first snowfall in New York, because we would go up in the mountains to look at the snow, but I never was in a snowfall. And so when I woke up and it was coming down, I said out loud, oh, it's not making noise.
Yeah, I know.
So I thought it would be like raindrops, but anyway, so getting used to the weather was a big thing, and it took me a couple of years to really get settled into the whole rhythm of the city. And there were a lot of new people coming into the city at the same time. A lot of
What year was that roughly?
1970. Yeah, so I was 25, and it was a explosive time, a lot of energy, people coming into the city to go to school, find work, find their career. And so, and Soho was just starting to develop a little bit. It had been abandoned buildings, and the city offered artists to move into the spaces for work, but artists decided not to move out. So it became a very popular place, and so popular that the real estate people moved the artists out, and it became a very fashionable place for restaurants, boutiques, and a gallery section.
So initially you weren't even in Harlem. You were.
Oh no, I was in the West Village for 10 years. The first 10 years I was in the West Village, moving around. Ended up on Gansevoort and Greenwich Street, you know, by there, where Whitney is now. I was there for about 2 years, and I outgrew the apartment, and the prices outgrew me. So I moved uptown, because at that point I had started to work up there. I was getting familiar with the territory, and I had joined a church up there, and I was starting to meet people that lived up there. So I felt kind of comfortable.
Now, if you were to compare the two scenes as an African-American artist between sort of the art world you kind of knew in the village and the art world you started to sort of engage in Harlem, how would you compare or talk about
Well, I didn't know a lot of artists in the village, in that I was going to museums, and the first couple of years I didn't do art. I was just trying to survive in the city. I did meet a few, like Benny Andrews. I eventually met him. I met some of the artists that lived in West Beth. I visited their studios, and but it wasn't until I moved uptown and I started kind of moving around at the Studio Museum, the Children's Art Carnival, and kind of interacting with a lot of artists, and they told me about other artists, and then so that's how I got connected to that.
So the carnival, did you teach at the carnival?
I taught there for about 2 years. I taught children coming in, because it was a very popular organization with the Board of Education. Betty Bailey Taylor, who was the founder, one of the founders of the Studio Museum, she created that, and she had classes bussed in. And then she also offered a lot of unemployed artists to come there and work. And so I met a lot of different people. And even David Hammond worked there at one point.
Because there was a federal funding program called Harduac, or there was like a catch tag, and somehow artists could draw into that fund. So there was a lot of political money available for cultural. Like, did you have any kind of interesting students when you were at the carnival? Anybody? Any students that you can remember?
Basquiat was there. Yeah. He came for about 6 weeks. He was in a high school program. I don't know I guess they got credit to come there, but several students came, and he was one of them for a amount of time.
Because the woman he's mentioned, Betty Blayton Taylor, had a real tight connection with the Museum of Modern Art.
Oh yeah, she was one of the founders.
Right.
Yeah.
Museum of Modern Art, not the founder.
The
The
studio.
studio was the founder, but she has other connections downtown.
MoMA.
And she started this artist program that really looked on how art could create a more balanced student. Like through the art, you could tackle reading and a lot of other things. She had this real kind of theory.
It was a French educator that she was using the format from to apply to her program. And she kind of became well known, I guess, kind of internationally and with the Board of Ed because of what she was trying to do.
It doesn't get talked about a lot. So it's like people like a kid like Basquiat or people in public school programs that had access to some of these programs in the carnival. And they did printing. They had a lot of
Oh yeah, there was a variety of things that they did. Well, I got all aspects, but she had a kiln there also, so they could work with clay, painting, and printing, like you said. There was actually a separate printing press in another facility that students could go to and learn how to print.
Yeah, so she really looked at the full person. Now, as you're looking at I know people have walked around and seen a lot of comparisons to Bearden, kind of connection to Bearden, and I do kind of remember him. I can't say I knew him, but I can remember seeing him in events. He was a very open person, very personable person. And when you start to talk to artists, almost every artist of our generation has some level of engagement or influence with him.
Right.
Were you in any way influenced by his work?
Well, he was a mentor. You know, I got to know him when I was working at the Department of Cultural Affairs through a woman there, Suzanne Randolph. She knew him. She called him Romy. And so eventually she introduced me. And then I saw his work first at the Museum of Modern Art when they had his solo exhibition there in sometime in the 70s. And that was where they showed or introduced his collage work, black and white. And they had blow-ups of it and all that. And that's when it clicked on me that I wanted to try collage rather than painting. And so I started doing that. But along the way, I did meet him at some point, and he was very friendly, very open, and always trying to give advice to younger artists and stuff like that. And eventually, he invited me over to his studio. I met his wife, and I stopped by different times.
Was the studio uptown, downtown?
He had a studio on Worcester Street in Canal. It was a 5-floor walk-up. I couldn't believe it. So he was up there with his wife and 2 cats. And so I would go up there and show him my work, and he would give me a little critique. Yeah, and that was fun. And then I traveled around. Every time he had a show, I would go and see it. But he was an influence, and so when I started off, and even now, people say, "Oh, I see Bearden in your work." And I said, "Well, you know, yeah, he influenced me a great deal."
And you see, but you moved to another dimension, so it has a kind of more 3D. When you still see it in your quilts, there's a kind of variation that you get to have.
Yeah, and I have a more tactile surface. I embellish the surfaces with a lot of different things, and whereas he did the flat paper collage, and then a lot of his work translated into prints. He did a lot of print series as well.
And as an artist, like kind of looking at the processes of how to do work and how to survive in New York, you said you started working for cultural affairs.
Oh, right. Oh, I had many jobs. I was going to prove my father wrong about starving artists. So that always was in the back of my mind. Michael, you don't want to be there. So I always had a 9 to 5. So let's see, I was a technical director at the Department of Cultural Affairs. I knew nothing about that, but they hired me. And I worked with Karen Bacon, who was a designer.
Kevin Bacon's sister, by the way, always all roads lead to Kevin Bacon. Karen Bacon was a sister of.
Right, yeah. And so she designed festivals for the Parks Department. And we did the New Year's Eve, Thanksgiving, special events. We tried to spread it around in all the parks. But we learned that the press only wanted to go to Central Park.
Central Park, you're listening? You always wanted Central Park over us.
So we didn't want to wear out the park. We wanted to show the other boroughs that we loved them. So we tried to spread it around. And then I was also in charge of, what do we call it? It was sort of a portable stage truck. And it traveled around to different communities in the summertime. And they provide performances for free.
It's sort of like public theater, a lot of the different
Yeah, it
groups.
was sort of like that. And I was in charge of that mainly because I had a driver's license. And from California, you get them when you're
Yeah, nobody's in New York, but you have a driver's license.
So, but it was a truck. So it was what they call a three-wheeler. It was 20 feet long, and I drove it around the city. And then I had a team of 6 people. They would unload it, drop out the stage part, level it, and all that, put up the lights, the sound, and all that in action.
Sounds like a Judy Garland.
So I did that for 2 years, and that's when also we had an event at the American Craft Museum on 53rd Street at the time, and it was Make a Banner, Fly a Banner. And it was at that point that I was introduced to fabric and creating something like a banner. The staff was given a challenge, a fun challenge, to do something to go along, because at the end of the week, we were going to parade around Fifth Avenue with a little band, and everybody's going to be waving their banners, and that was going to be the final part. So I made the banner, Mother Earth back here, and I cut it all out of scrap material, and I pinned it down, but I didn't know how to sew. So I didn't know what to do with it. So I knew I didn't want to use glue. So I took it to a tailor. He said $100. I said no. I took it one that made clothes, and she wanted to show me how to use a sewing machine. And I thought it was so complex. I said no way. So I walked out, and then time was going, so I had to meet up with the deadline. So I said, okay, Michael, you get the needle and thread, up and down, up and down. So I sewed it all down.
So that's really historic back there. Everything happens, everything comes together there.
So I finished it, and after it was finished, I realized that I could go further with this and really develop it, and it was easier than buying paint, cleaning brushes, taking care of canvases so they don't get punctured or anything, and just roll up the fabric and put it under the bed.
He has a great name. Yeah, so how long did you have, your longest lasting sewing machine was how many?
I had about 30 years.
30 years, and he called it his dance part.
Right.
And where did you get the sewing machine?
Macy's. For the first year of working with fabric, I was doing it by hand. And at the end of that year, I realized doing my 9 to 5 and coming home trying to sew by hand, it wasn't going to work. So I went to Macy's. At that time, they had a sewing machine department and fabric, and I bought this little sewing machine, a table model. It came with a little table, and that started me off in sewing. It had that little arch that you're kind of familiar with, so I had all the fabric went through that little arch. So that's where I said that's the sewing machine knew my moves, because I had to wrestle to get the thing. It had to stand still, and we had to work together. So I did that, and so that one machine. I never had a second machine. I always was wondering what would happen, but it didn't happen. So I worked on that machine.
It's really, and there's some great photographs you go online of you from that machine. Now we're coming into, say, the 80s period in New York, 90s.
With the dance partner, I had a personal trainer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my personal trainer was a 60-minute clock. A timer that you have in the kitchen, but I was using it in my sewing machine. And I needed that for a person working 9 to 5. You have a budget of time, so you can't waste it. So I would turn that timer on, and when the bell went off, I would survey what I did. I would kind of determine where I wanted to go, and I would start it up again, but I had to work within that 60 minutes. And so I did that and have done that for years, and it really worked out.
He told me this story not long ago. It's so true. It's like, if you have a project that's long term and you want to get it done and you stop to answer the phone, you do this, the timer just says, okay, nothing else. So that timer clicks, no matter what, I'm not going to do it. Two things that helped me when you told me that is that you concentrate, and then you also see how much you got done in that time. So if you thought the job was going to take 2 hours, you've already spent a concentrated 1 hour, you realize, oh, it's going to take 3 hours, 4 hours. It was a really great life lesson. And you use it. How many quilts from your, you did the jazz series.
Oh, 12.
He did 12 quilts, one a month.
Right, one a month every 30 days.
Every 30 days he got knocked out a quilt. And that's
Right.
2 in the show.
There's 2 in the
This one
show, and
over-
they're 9 feet by 6 feet
Yeah,
wide.
that's the one over here,
And
too.
I did one every 30. I tell people I was possessed. I was possessed.
But the timer helped.
The timer helped a great deal, yeah. Because I was coming home from work, changing clothes, eating very quickly, jumping on the sewing machine for 3 or 4 hours, go to sleep, get up, go to work, come back, do the same thing. And on the weekends, kind of expanded it to like 6 to 8 hours a day. Yeah.
And during the same time period, or maybe a little earlier, we were going through the AIDS period. So you came in the 70s, I came in the early 80s, and it was one sort of city in that period, and then the AIDS put us on pause with at least the end of the 80s, early 90s. And so is any of your work sort of drawn from that, or did that period fire you up to sort of be more productive, or how do you think that would
Well,
show
I knew a
up?
lot of people that died at that period. A lot of people were my age, very ambitious, they had careers going and everything like that. So what I did do, at one point, I was at a church, the Abyssinian Baptist Church, and they were performing Take My Brother Home. And a friend of ours, Karen Phillips, suggested that Michael, that would be a good quilt theme. So in that quilt that's in the show, Take
It's
My
right
Brother
there,
Home.
it's
Oh
right
yeah,
there.
Take My Brother Home there. I chose to do a religious person in the church. Yeah, and on the cross, I put a black male, and the theme is to take my brother home, brother home to Jesus. And so,
And
I
that
did
poster,
4.
yeah, he did 4, and the church made a poster of that, and we sold it as an art. He signed, Reverend Butts and Michael signed, I forget how many.
185.
185.
Because it was
Oh, the 185th
185th
anniversary of the church, right?
Right.
And Karen organizes a fundraiser toward the church that we would get them framed, and people would get them framed, and I could see some choices. And we sold them all. I mean, really, it was very popular.
Yeah. So that was the result of the AIDS and my feelings about that. And I did 4 in that series.
That's what and thinking about like moving forward, like okay, you did now you can see you're getting into the master class level in terms of the quality of your work and all that. So how did you start to see yourself in the room of other artists? Like who would you saw yourself as comparatives with or rivals?
I'm moving into like storytelling. Some of the artists I was like looking at was Faith Ringo, Frida Kahlo. I was looking at Archibald Motley, William H. Johnson, of course Bearden, Jacob Lawrence. Those were some of the people that were really popping out at me. That they told story. They had a lot of color going on in their work, and so I was kind of looking at that. I also liked abstract, so I was like looking at Picasso, Matisse especially. I love his color, and even Georgia O'Keeffe. I liked her as well.
Well, you're from the West.
And then Divacorn as well.
And you do other, we don't have any in the show, I don't think, but you've done quotes that are not storytelling, but more sort of abstract.
Oh, yeah.
nature.
Well, yeah, we don't have those. Yeah.
Right, but there's some that are more patterned, more abstract. And the G's Ben show.
Yeah, I did a G's Ben quilt in that they have a pattern called rooftop or housetop. It's called housetop. And so I wanted to try my hand at doing that because it seemed very easy, but it's not. And so I chose different colors and it kind of grew on me. It ended up 10 feet long and 6 feet wide. I don't know why it happened.
A roll.
Yeah, I work on the floor, so I guess that's why it ran away from me. I didn't know when to stop. But yeah, I
It's
did
pretty
that.
nice though.
Yeah.
It's about, how long do you think it is?
It's 10 feet.
Oh, 10. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I could cut it in half and make 2 quilts.
2 for 1. Now, you're part of a group called the Women of Color
Quilting Network.
Quilting Network.
Yeah.
Now, are there any other men in the group?
Well, let's see. There are some now. When I joined about maybe 20 years ago, I was the first. There was a big discussion before I was accepted because
No gender sensitivity back then. No.
So what's it called again? The Women?
Women of Color
Quilting
Quilt Network.
Right.
Yeah, it's a national organization, and the founder is Dr. Carolyn Maslubi. She actually is a scientist, but she transferred over to doing this. I don't know, for relaxation or whatever, but it really took off. And she also was working with a woman named Questa Binberry, who was a librarian, retired librarian, who did several research books on African American quilts and got the ball rolling to reintroduce to history that they did exist. And she identified names of people, types of quilts and locations and all that. And so Carolyn kind of worked with her and kind of carried on that activity.
She's been a big promoter of the quilt.
She's promoted a lot. She's had a lot of traveling exhibits and stuff. And I, being a part of that group, we always were given different themes to work with on each show. So that was a great challenge for me to try to put together a story quilt related to that particular theme. So that helped me a great deal to develop my skills.
Because like for the Clinton Museum in Arkansas, didn't you do a quilt recently?
Right. Hillary Clinton, for the Year of the Woman, brought together 18 quilters to do a quilt on individual women that were significant in women causes. And so I chose Shirley Chisholm. And it ended up 7 feet square. And it has been in Little Rock, Arkansas at the Presidential Library. I came to New York for a week or two a couple of months ago. It was here very quickly and then left. And now it's in Texas at a big Houston Quilt Festival. And that goes on until I think November something. And then she comes back home to me in January.
He talks about them like that, like their family. They
They are the children.
the children. Right. Now you have one in the embassy somewhere in the.
I have several in 2 embassies. One in Mali is in one. Another one is, I can't think of the name of it.
Isn't one Josephine Baker? One of them is
Josephine Baker's in Mali. Yeah, there's 2. There's a series of 2. One's in the back here, and one's in Mali. Yeah.
I think you actually have 4 in the Mali Museum total.
Yeah, and in another museum. Yeah, and embassy.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know the name of the country.
That's you're forgiven.
Thank
They're
you.
forgiven.
Thank you.
Now in the back there's a quilt that with a woman's in a black and red dress. You know,
Oh, that's Josephine Baker.
Well, that's just me. And there used to be flea markets where there's buildings now on 23rd, 6th Avenue in the 20s. It was parking lots for a whole block. And there were like vendors and stuff. And one Saturday or whatever, when we were looking at stuff, and so there's 2 gentlemen, and he's looking at stuff, and he holds up a dress.
No, it was a woman.
It was a woman, no, I mean, we were the 2 gentlemen, original salesperson. And we said, oh, I think we're going to take this or whatever. And she's like, what are you going to do? She's like, she's folding it up and we agree on the price. Like, what are you going to do with it? And we said, well, cut it in half. She says, cut it in half. And so there's 2 black and white, there's 2 quilts with.
Yeah, what I do, I start using actual clothing in my quilts. And for the dresses, some of the dresses were so special in terms of like one of a kind that I bought, that I didn't want to sew the whole dress onto the quilt and lose the back. So what I would do is like try to cut the front and save the back and put that on another quilt. And that's what I've done for the Brazilian Love Goddess. You have one quilt here, and then you have the other part of the dress in the back on the other one. And for Josephine Baker, I did the same thing.
And they're both Josephine, though. The theme is both Josephine.
Right.
Of all your quilts, I know it's hard to pick a special.
Don't ask me.
Okay, then I won't do that. We'll talk a little bit about what is people like we sort of admire from our generation is James Baldwin. He's a Harlem person, James Baldwin. And you've done now a series of James Baldwin.
Right. Here's one right here. Born into a Lie. This is one of 4. One is the Schomburg Library. One was purchased for the African American New Cultural Museum. It's part of the Smithsonian in DC. And this is one of them. And I created that after reading the poem. Well, actually, it was not a poem, it was a statement that he made. But a lot of the work I'm inspired by what I read, either history, or mythology, or something to do with the culture of some place. And I start to visualize. I don't draw anything. I generally just kind of conceptualize it in my mind.
And then you kind of cut it out?
I start cutting.
Oh, wow.
And the thing is that I started thinking about that answer, about I just visualize it, but I don't visualize it the way you see it.
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking, I'm visualizing in black and white because I see the forms that I want, but I don't know what colors I'm going to have until I pull out all the fabric that I have, and not all of it, but some of it, on the floor, and I look at it like a palette of color, and then I start choosing what color emotionally I feel applies to the theme that I have. And that's how I go about putting it together. But I see it in my mind. And one thing related to traditional quilting, I don't really do traditional quilting. I'm very organic in terms of the way I cut. I don't use a ruler. I just kind of visualize what size and space I want.
Well, that's why the rooftop was so hard, because all those corners had to meet each other. And when you're doing the rooftop quilt, like it's like it's a system.
Right.
So imposed.
Geometric, yeah. So I just cut out chalk and then draw out the space and cut it out. It's like putting a puzzle together for me. And so this is a James Baldwin quilt.
And you use it like, I love the ornament, like the buttons and the different things.
Right.
And we were joking, all our mothers had cans of buttons.
Oh, my mother
Didn't
did.
you?
I had nobody in my family that did quilting. So
Nobody from the South?
No, I don't know why. I never asked, but when I found out about what quilts were in New York and all that, and I said, well, you didn't really need a quilt in LA because it wasn't ever, really cold.
Right.
So I figured that was the reason why we didn't have quilts. I don't know, but I taught myself how to make a quilt, and I kind of learned in New York what a quilt was. And so,
How did you decide about like the physical ornamentation? Because I assume you make the quilt and it's up, and then you start thinking about how you want to sort of be down.
Not up, it's down.
Well, no, I mean down. It's right up on the floor. It's true, but if I ever go to his house, he's done with it on the floor or whatever, he would say, John, I think I really got this, And he said, okay, cover your eyes. I could never look. And he would kind of put it up on the wall. He'd have like a bar put up on the wall, and then it'd be like magic.
Yeah, I always try to introduce my quilts when they're fully open, not when they're all wrinkled up. To start off, people looking at the wrinkled part. I like to present it when it's like fully, ready to be shown. So that's what I would do. Everybody that came over, I would have to close their eyes until I opened it up.
Sometimes I peek, but I wouldn't tell you. But when you think about the ornamentation, how do you do that? Like the quilt would have been pretty much done, and then you come back and put on like the buttons.
Right. Well, I guess over time, like you said, I've started off with just a very flat surface, and as time has moved on, I started to get more adventurous, exploring what possibilities are. I could go on the quilt, on the surface in terms of tactile. This is very tactile over here. I have like plastic soldiers here. I have plastic knives here, African masks. I have these little metal elephants, buttons, and beads here going on. And so there's a lot. And then I use textile paint to put words on my quilts.
And it's more recent. When do you think you started putting words on your quilts?
I don't know, maybe about a good 6, 7, 8 years ago. Faith Bingo does it, so I thought I could do it. And so I recently I've started to use a stencil, but prior to that I was doing it all by hand, and I didn't really draw out the letter before I would just apply the paint and the brush. And so one person asked me, well, Michael, what happens if you make a mistake? I said, I don't make mistakes.
You'll never see it.
But over time, I've just added more and more because I think that enhances the whole appearance of the story.
Yeah, but Michael has an amazing African art collection as well. So was this piece from?
Yes, it was in my collection. I thought I could sacrifice it.
We don't want to use that. And then the flower's almost three-dimensional.
That's an imported fabric that I found in a store. I buy all my fabrics in New York and around the city. Earlier on, there used to be a lot of fabric stores on 57th Street, but they're all gone. And then in Soho, there used to be abundance of them, but they're kind of like shrinking away. And so I'm now going to the famous garment district, 39th, 40, in 3 or 4 blocks they have of fabric.
But now this was South African fabric.
Yeah, that was something given to me. A friend of mine, I don't know if she was there or how she got it, but she presented me a banner of Nelson Mandela. And so what I did was take it apart and reassembled it to go into the quilt. It was like a banner, sort of like a, for a
Oh, this is after he died, because you have like, these are his birth dates, 19...
Right,
19
that's when he was born, that's when he died.
Yeah, so this is after 2013.
Yeah, and this is the name of the prison where he was in, and those were the numbers that he was given as I identify him in the prison on both sides.
So I think we're wrap up a little and let people ask some questions. Do you mind some questions? Do you mind questions?
Oh, no.
So we'll talk a little bit like how this is like a great opportunity, the gallery show, and, and you know they're getting the honor in DC. And they just made you just join some group of advisors for craft or something.
Oh, well, it's a secret, but
They're not listening.
well, I got a call recently, and I was told that I was selected to be a 2024 fellow for the American Craft Council. So.
One last question before we open up. As an African American artist, I mean, we see a lot of focus now on African American artists and a broader sense of exposure. Like, how do you feel like about this time in terms of like the community for African American artists, and do you feel it's better? Is there any advice you would give to like a young artist starting out?
Well, I think it's better overall for the community and for young people to kind of see themselves. I think it empowers them. Any sort of art form, I think, is good that they could see themselves in. Advice, it takes work and discipline. And you need some money for supplies. But discipline and not letting sort of like outside forces
Because you're really stuck with your vision. And so having that job, sort of like Bearden in the same way, having an independent way to meet your life obligations. If you look over your work over time, there's like a truism to your vision. So there is a body of work.
Yeah, it was I say a dream. You know, when I was small and after I saw Van Gogh, and I guess maybe prior to that, drawing and unconsciously, I wanted to be an artist. And so I have pursued that. And I think of Langston Hughes, what becomes of a dream deferred. So I didn't want that to happen. So I used that in the back of my mind. Just went forward with the dream. And it wasn't a straight line, but here I am. Yeah.
It's interesting because you tell the story of like, being a kid, being confined, and sort of having use your imagination. Later on, when you start talking about putting the fabric together, just imagining how the pieces come together, I was feeling the same thing. It was the same. The brain was still doing the same thing.
Yeah, the imagination. And then the visualization, who knew? I always thought you had to have a sketch pad, but it just started happening up here, and it works, for me.
Still seem pretty sharp. So any questions? We'll take a few questions. Anybody? Yes. Could you just stand up so everybody?
Sure.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Michael, you said that you don't do traditional quilts, but when you look at the edges of many
Oh,
of them,
right.
it looks like
You caught me.
so how much did you study traditional quilting to reject it?
Well, that first year, or maybe that first and second year, I did join some quilt guilds in Manhattan. The Manhattan Quilt Guild, I think that was the name of it. I joined that, and then I got familiar with quilt magazines. But in going to the guild, and they met, I think, once a week on the weekends, it was show and tell, and I was introduced to the borders that you could put on the quilts and stuff like that. And I was really impressed by all of that. But like I said, it wasn't me. But I did, for some time, try 2 or 3 traditional quilts with the borders, the geometric shapes, and all of that. And I guess I learned what they do, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I moved away from that. But I did like the border effect that gave. And so in the back, you'll see on some quilts, I continue that. But I've gotten lazy over the years, and so I just put a strip of material around it. You call it a day.
And those people do the backing, so you do the front.
Oh, well, yeah, I do what they call the quilt top. What you see, I've created. But these are made like a quilt. There's 3 layers. There's the top, there's a batting in the middle, and there's a backing. And what I do is have sleeves put on. So I farm out the quilts to professional quilters that put all 3 pieces together for me. And they also apply the quilting pattern or designs on the quilt as well. And
I just love that you use the terry cloth towel. I mean, you would rarely see that, and it must be very difficult to sew on the machine.
well, I've been grabbing any fabric I can see and sew with. So I didn't even think about that. I've cut my shirts up. I've cut all sorts of things up to sew onto fabric. I don't restrict myself.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting in the G-Span quilt show. Those people were isolation, but they took on projects. So for Bloomingdale's, they were supposed to make like bed covers and stuff. And they had all this extra corduroy, which most quilters don't use,
Right.
but they used it. That's what they had, and it was so much better because it was like paint. It had a density of color. So when you saw their quilts from a distance, you thought you were looking at painted canvases. You didn't realize it was, well, and then from being washed and everything like that, it had a great luster to it. So that has like a kind of more of a density than the other fabric because it's really, it's 3-dimensional really. It's not.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to, do you listen to music when you work? Or
Yes,
do
listen to
you
music.
listen to music when you?
Oh, definitely. I like a lot of jazz music, but I also cover the gamut. I like Brazilian music. I like traditional music from different countries.
So Yimiya, was that to like Brazilian music?
Yeah, I guess Brazilian love goddess. Yeah, over there. Yeah. But yeah, I do listen to a lot of music because it also kind of guides me a little bit emotionally where I want to go with my quilt, and so it really helps a great deal.
Anyone else? Class, come on.
Michael, how do you feel about the sort of classifications that are placed upon your work insofar as it's called craft, or sometimes it's called decorative, or I'm biased, but to my eye, this looks like what could easily be categorized under the rubric of fine art. Do you feel that your life's work is subjugated by those categories, or?
I think those barriers are breaking down because fine artists are taking fabric and draping it on the wall, having painted on it or doing something with it and calling it art. It's going into galleries and museums. So I don't think it's a hard line anymore, but there are still some old, traditional people that think like that, which should be separated. Only it's exclusion, it's all art to me, and it should be all art.
We'll take here and then the next lady.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Okay.
John, I was wondering, when you farm out the quilting with the long arm book, do you describe what you want, the texture?
Yeah, sometimes I do. But sometimes I trust the person I'm working with. I know their work, and they worked for me before, so I let them kind of do what they want on it.
You have a question?
I was just curious, is there a meaning to the rabbit and to what it looks like a serpent down here?
Yeah, there is. This is, again, it's called Take My Brother Home, and on the cross, there's a black male figure, and in the church, that's supposed to be a church, there's a deer who is considered a disbeliever running out of the church, and the serpent is supposed to represent Satan, that's always around, evil. And so, and that, again, there's the embellishments on there. You have buttons, and the face of the serpent is actually taken out of a fabric from the Cameroons the beaded part of it.
Yeah.
And so, and I used that same fabric, beaded head in Yimaya fabric as well. You could see that in there.
And then the Brazilian love goddess, we were noticing there's like little bells at the bottom.
Oh yeah, Brazilian love goddess is also Yimaya. Yimaya is a Yoruba deity, and she came over with the enslaved people, and in the African diaspora, enslaved people were taken to Brazil, the Caribbean, the New World, and so she protects them when they go out into water. In Brazil, they honor her as a love goddess, and they have a big festival at the end of the year. They dress up in white and they push out little floats into the ocean, hoping that she brings them fortune and love and good, positive energy. And so her color is blue. She has a sword in her hand to fight evil. She has a serpent there also to help her fight evil. And supposedly the little bells at the bottom, when her presence or spirit is in the room, the bells make a noise.
Cool. So we'll ring the bell on that note. So we'll ring the bell on that note. You're welcome to look around some more, and we're gonna have some wine and things.